the time has come for us to talk about communism. What is communism? Communism is the doctrine of the conditions of the liberation of the proletariat. What is proletariat? The proletariat is that class in society which lives entirely from the sale of its labor and does not draw profit from any kind of capital, whose weal and woe, whose life and death, whose sole existence depends on the demand for labor, hence on the changing state of business, on the vagaries of unbridled competition. The proletariat, or the class of proletarians, is, in a word, the working class of the 19th century. I find this definition by Friedrich Engels to be very helpful in understanding of the basics of communism. I highly recommend you read the Principles of Communism yourselves. Reading that short pamphlet has really been helpful to my understanding of communism and leftist ideology as a whole. So again, what is a simple take on communism? Well, very basically, primitively put, communism is the power of the people. It is your power and my power returned to us. So we as people will be able to decide for ourselves how to govern the production, how to distribute the benefits that the production produces. So what will the new social order have to be like? Above all, it will have to take control of industry and all of its branches of production out of the hands of mutually competing individuals, and instead institute a system in which all these branches of production are operated by society as a whole, that is, for the common account, according to a common plan, and with the participation of all members of society. It will, in other words, abolish competition and replace it with association. Moreover, since the management of industry by individuals necessarily implies private property, and since competition is in reality merely the manner and form in which the control of industry by private property owners express itself, it follows that private property cannot be separated from competition and the individual management of industry. Private property must therefore be abolished, and in its place must come the common utilization of all instruments of production and the distribution of all products according to common agreement. In a word, what is called the communal ownership of goods. In fact, the abolition of private property is doubtless the shortest and most significant way to characterize the revolution in the whole social order, which has been made necessary by the development of industry, and for this reason it is rightly advanced by communists as their main demand. I also find this quote from the three sources and three component parts of Marxism by Lenin to be helpful in understanding of communism. People always have been the foolish victims of deception and self-deception in politics, and they always will be until they have learned to seek out the interests of some class or other behind all moral, religious, political, and social phrases, declarations, and promises. And this quote from State and Revolution. The dictatorship of the proletariat, that is, the organization of the vanguard of the oppressed as the ruling class, for the purpose of suppressing the oppressors, cannot result merely in an expansion of democracy, simultaneously with an immense expansion of democracy, which for the first time becomes democracy for the poor, democracy for the people, and not democracy for the moneybags. The dictatorship of the proletariat imposes a series of restrictions on the freedom of the oppressors, the exploiters, the capitalists. You might have heard all of this before, and you might still wonder what communism actually implies. And I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to be able to explain everything in much detail and clarify all the questions you've ever had about communism. But what I'm going to try and do is explain how I understand communism. And I want to continue studying communism, and I encourage as many people as possible to start doing that, because I see much potential in this particular ideology, and I think that we are going to greatly benefit from learning about it together. So one of the main goals of communism is the abolition of the state, and Lenin describes the abolition of the state coming in stages. He does talk about how the people will have to seize power first, because obviously no one is going to just give up being in the government and give all the means of production to the people. People will have to do it themselves. And after that, the state is going to slowly dissolve itself and become obsolete. So it isn't going to be a purposeful destruction of the government per se. The government is going to become unnecessary. So the people will continue to self-govern. And this is the final stage of communism, according to Lenin, the abolition of the state. Engels also talks about how the abolition of private property is also a process. He talks about it in the principles of communism that I've already quoted today. So I do think that it's very helpful to see his 1, 2, 3 kind of description of the abolition of the state and some of his suggestions that may be taken out of context and turned into reformism, which Lenin strongly opposed. In State and Revolution, Lenin talks about the problems that may arise with gradualism. So therefore, the peaceful abolition of property and the state is very highly unlikely to happen. Engels and Lenin alike thought that it was pretty much impossible, because people who are in power are not going to willingly give up the power. We'll have to convince them somehow that they have to share the power with the people, or rather give back the power to the people. I don't want to cover too much in this one little video, and I just want to cover the basics. I'm going to keep on covering various aspects of communism here on my channel, so if you want to learn more about communism, stick around and talk to me and to others in the comments about what you have learned about communism and what you wish to learn more about. And together, hopefully, we'll be able to help each other learn and understand in the best way possible.